Our lives are connected by silver threads of fate, weaving a complex tapestry of love, loss, and ultimate redemption in the dark. We follow these connections to find the stories that bind us all together. Hit subscribe now and become part of our shared, cinematic narrative.
My daughter looked across her kitchen island and said it without flinching. "Mom, I think it'd be best if you didn't come to the wedding." She didn't cry. She didn't soften it. She just stirred her coffee and waited for me to react like I was a problem she'd already solved in her head. I smiled the way I learned to smile 30 years ago when her father was dying, and I had to keep her brother from seeing me fall apart. I reached across that cold marble countertop, squeezed her hand, and said, "Whatever you need, sweetheart." She exhaled. That exhale is what cut me deepest. Not the words, the relief. What she didn't know was that the venue she'd booked, the caterer she'd hired, the string quartet that was going to play her down the aisle, every single contract sitting in that ivory folder on her dining room table had my name on them. Not hers. Mine. And on the morning of October 11th, when 300 guests showed up to a hall with no chairs set up, no flowers on the arch, and no caterer in the kitchen, I was exactly where she told me to be, at home. In my robe, drinking tea. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the spring before all this. I'm 64 years old. My name is Ruth Ann Pemberton. I work the front desk at a podiatry clinic in a strip mall off Route 9 in central New Jersey. And 3 nights a week, I drive over to St. Louis, Benson's, and sit with hospice patients who don't have family. I've been doing the hospice work for almost 12 years now. It pays nothing. It costs me gas money. I do it because when my husband Daniel was dying in 1994, a woman named Mrs. Kovacs sat with him on the nights I had to be home with the kids, and I never forgot what that meant. My daughter Cassidy was 4 when Daniel passed. Her brother Lincoln was 7. I raised them in a little brown house on Hawthorne Street that I bought with the life insurance and a 30-year mortgage I paid off 2 summers ago. The house has a crooked back porch and a kitchen sink that drips no matter how many times I tighten the washer, but it's mine. I raised both kids in that house, PB&J sandwiches and library cards and homemade Halloween costumes from old curtains. Lincoln moved out to Denver after college and calls me every other Sunday. Cassidy stayed close. She got her marketing degree, moved to Princeton, and started working for a financial firm whose name I can never remember. When she called me on a Wednesday afternoon in early April to tell me she was engaged, I was eating tuna salad out of the container at my desk. I dropped the fork. Honey, that's wonderful. Tell me everything." She laughed, and for 1 second she sounded like the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "His name is Brent Halverson. I've been seeing him for almost a year, Mom." A year. I'd heard the name maybe twice. "Halverson," I said carefully. "That's not a name I know. His family's from Greenwich. His dad runs a hedge fund. They're a really established family." I noticed the word she chose. Established. Not nice. Not kind. Established. "Well, when do I get to meet him?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that has weight. "Soon, Mom. Things are just really busy right now. The wedding's going to be a lot to plan." I hung up and sat in that little vinyl chair behind the front desk and let myself cry for about 90 seconds. Then I blew my nose and went back to checking in patients. My baby girl was getting married. That was supposed to be the only thing that mattered. 2 weeks later, I drove out to her place in Princeton on a Sunday afternoon to meet Brent. I brought a peach cobbler. I'd been making that cobbler since Cassidy was in middle school. She used to ask for it instead of birthday cake. Brent answered the door in a button-down shirt and the kind of loafers I'd only ever seen in magazines. He was tall, thin, polite in that way that doesn't quite touch you. "Mrs. Pemberton, Cassidy's told me a lot about you." He hadn't, I could tell. He hugged me with one arm and took the cobbler dish like it might be contagious. Their townhouse smelled like a candle store. There were throw pillows I was afraid to lean on. Cassidy had cut her hair into one of those expensive bobs that costs more than my electric bill. She poured me a glass of wine I didn't ask for and sat across from me in a chair instead of next to me on the couch. "So, the wedding." I tried to sound bright. "Tell me what you're thinking." Brent and Cassidy did that thing couples do when they've already had the conversation. They looked at each other first. "We're thinking October," Cassidy said. "Brent's family has a connection at this place called Stonebrook Estate up in Bedford. It's gorgeous, Mom. Really old, really beautiful." "Bedford, New York?" "Yeah, that's quite a drive. It's where Brent's family is." It made sense. I nodded. I sipped the wine I didn't want. "How many guests?" "Around 300. I almost choked. 300? Brent's family is huge, and his dad has a lot of business contacts. Well, I'd love to help. With anything. The flowers, the favors, even just stuffing envelopes. Just put me to work." Another look between them. Brent cleared his throat. "Cassidy's mom. My mother has a wedding planner she's used for both my sisters. She's kind of taken the reins. We don't want to overload you." "I wouldn't be overloaded. I'd be honored." Cassidy's smile got tight. "Mom, it's handled. Really, just enjoy it." I drove home that night with the empty cobbler dish on the passenger seat. They'd eaten one slice between them. The rest was wrapped in foil for me to take with me. I cried on Route 1 between Cranberry and Hightstown. Quiet crying, the kind that doesn't make noise but blurs the headlights ahead of you. The next month, I called Cassidy 4 times. She returned 1. We talked for 11 minutes. She told me they'd picked colors. Champagne and dusty rose. "What about my dress, honey? Is there a color I should avoid?" "I want to be respectful. Just not white, Mom, or anything too flashy. Should I send you pictures of what I'm thinking?" "If you want. I trust you." 6 words that landed like a closed door. In late May, my sister Doreen called me on a Saturday morning. I was out in the yard pulling weeds. "Ruthie, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay. Were you at the engagement party last night?" I sat down right there in the dirt. "What engagement party?" "Oh, honey. Oh, no." She'd seen the photos on Instagram. Cassidy's friend from college had tagged her. There were 80 pictures. A backyard estate in Greenwich strung with lanterns. Cassidy in a cream cocktail dress. Brent's mother, a tall woman with platinum hair, holding both their hands. A 4-piece band. A raw bar. Cassidy laughing with her arms around 2 women I'd never seen before. Lincoln wasn't there either. I was 800 miles away in his head, and Cassidy hadn't told him anything. I asked Doreen to send me the link. I sat in the grass and scrolled through every single photo. I wasn't in any of them. I wasn't even in the background. I had not been told. I called Cassidy that evening. She answered on the 5th ring, sounding annoyed. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. I just wanted to ask you about last night." Silence. "Cass, Mom, it was a small thing. Brent's mom kind of just put it together. It wasn't a real party. Doreen saw 80 photos. Mom, please don't make this a thing. I'm your mother. I know who you are." She hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I felt something inside my chest I'd never felt before. Not hurt exactly. Something colder. Like a door I'd been holding open with my foot finally swinging shut. A week later, my neighbor, Mr. Halpern, caught me bringing in the trash cans. He's 78, a widower, used to coach Lincoln's Little League team. "Ruthie, how are you holding up? Cassidy mentioned you've been having a rough go of it." I froze with the trash can lid in my hand. "What?" "She said you've been struggling lately. Memory things. She said the family was figuring out how to help. I just want you to know if you need anything, anybody to drive you to a doctor, you call me." I felt the blood leave my face. "Bill, I'm fine. I work 2 jobs. I'm sharper than I was at 40. He looked confused. "Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood her. When did you talk to her?" "She stopped by a few weeks ago. Said she was checking on the house." I hadn't asked her to check on anything. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd helped both my children with their homework for almost 2 decades, and I tried to think clearly. My daughter was telling people I had memory problems. My daughter was telling people I was deteriorating. Why? Doreen called me 3 days later. Her voice was strange. "Ruthie, I had lunch with Margie Fontaine after church. You remember Margie? She does the flowers at the parish. She asked me if it was true that you'd had a breakdown last year." "What?" She said someone at the country club where she does the spring auction had mentioned that Cassidy Pemberton's mother had been hospitalized for mental health and that the family was trying to keep it quiet. I couldn't speak. Ruthie, are you there? I'm here. What is your daughter doing? I don't know. You need to find out. I will. I called Cassidy that night. She didn't answer. I called the next morning. Voicemail. I drove to Princeton on Saturday and knocked on her door without warning. She opened it in workout clothes and her face fell. Mom, what are you doing here? We need to talk. May I come in? She let me in. Brent wasn't there. We sat in her perfect living room and I asked her, plainly, if she had told people I had memory problems. If she had told people I'd been hospitalized for mental illness. She started crying. Real tears. Real shame. Mom, answer me, Cassidy. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. She wiped her face with the back of her hand the way she did when she was 8. Brent's family is. They're a lot. His mother judges everything. Where you went to school, what your father did for a living, what kind of car you drive. And I told a few small things to make it easier. To make the gap not so obvious. What gap? She looked at the floor. The gap between us and them. And what did you tell them about me? Long silence. I told him you weren't really in the picture, that you'd had some health issues, that my Aunt Doreen was more of a mother figure to me growing up. I could not breathe. You told them I wasn't in the picture. Mom, please. I raised you alone. From the time you were 4 years old, I worked 2 jobs so you could play soccer and take piano. I sat up with you when you had pneumonia in 3rd grade and I missed 2 weeks of work. And you told them I wasn't in the picture. I'm sorry. Are you? She was crying again. I wasn't. I felt very far away from my own body. Cassidy, am I invited to your wedding? She didn't answer fast enough. I drove home in silence. I didn't put the radio on. I didn't stop for gas even though I needed it. I went home and sat in my living room until the sun went down and then I went to bed without eating. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday, I was vacuuming the waiting room at the podiatry clinic before my shift started. I'd been doing the cleaning too, on top of the front desk, ever since the previous cleaning lady quit and Dr. Ramos couldn't find a replacement. I was emptying the recycling bin when I noticed an envelope at the bottom that had been forwarded to me from my old P.O. box. I'd had that P.O. box for years and never closed it because Lincoln still sent his Christmas cards there out of habit. The envelope was from a place called Stonebrook Estate, the Bedford venue. I opened it standing right there next to the recycling bin. It was an invoice, a balance due notice, $42,000 due September 15th. The contract holder listed at the top of the invoice was Ruth Ann Pemberton. I sat down in one of the waiting room chairs and read it 3 times. I did not understand. Then I started to understand. And then I started to understand. And then I felt sick. I went home that night and I logged into the bank account I'd opened with Cassidy when she went off to college. A joint account. I'd put a few hundred in it every month back then so she could have grocery money. After she graduated, I'd kept depositing into it as a habit. It was tied to my main savings as overdraft protection. I had never thought about that link. I had not looked at the joint account in probably 4 years. I'd been depositing my hospice mileage reimbursements into it because Cassidy once said she might want to use it to start saving for a house. The balance was negative $1,200. It had pulled from my savings. My savings had $863 left in it. 6 weeks earlier, it had held $31,000. 30 years of saving. $5 here, $20 there. The buffer I kept in case Lincoln's kids needed something, or my car finally died, or I had to retire early. I called Doreen at 11 o'clock at night. She took everything. What? Doreen. She took everything. She used my name to book the venue. She used my account. There's nothing left. Doreen drove over at midnight. We sat at my kitchen table and went through the bank statements together. Check after check. Florist, caterer, photographer, string quartet, calligrapher. String quartet, calligrapher, dress alterations. The signatures on the checks were not mine. They looked like mine. They were almost mine, but they were not mine. I did not sleep that night. At 6 a.m., I called the bank and froze the account. At 9, I called a lawyer named Diane Bukowski, whose card I'd gotten from a brochure at the senior center. She agreed to see me on Monday morning for a free consultation. I spent the weekend going through every document I could find. I drove out to Stonebrook Estate myself on Saturday and asked to see the contract. The woman at the front desk was polite. She brought it out. My name was on every line. Signature. Initials. Email address that wasn't mine. Phone number that wasn't mine. The contact info was for someone they assumed was me. I called the florist, the caterer, the photographer. Same story every time. Ruth Ann Pemberton, primary contact, financial guarantor, on the hook for the balance. Total wedding budget on the contracts, $178,000. My daughter had used my name and my credit and my savings to book a $178,000 wedding while telling her future in-laws I was not in the picture. Diane Bukowski listened to the whole story on Monday morning without saying a word. When I finished, she set down her pen. Ruth, what do you want to happen here? I don't know. Most people in your situation want one of two things. They want their money back or they want the truth told. I want both. She nodded. The money is recoverable. It's also fraud, and your daughter could face charges. But there's a third option you might not have considered. What? You're the contract holder. Legally. Your forged signature aside, every vendor thinks you're the one paying. That means you have the right to cancel, to modify, to not pay. You don't have to destroy the wedding to use that power. You just have to be willing to use it. I sat with that for a long time. That night, I drafted a letter to my daughter. I rewrote it 11 times. The final version was 4 sentences. Cassidy, I know about Stonebrook. I know about the florist and the caterer and the rest. I know about the joint account. You have until June 30th to tell Brent and his family the truth, or I will. Mom. She called me 20 minutes after I sent it. She was hysterical. Mom, please, please, you can't do this. Please, I'll fix it. I'll pay you back. Please don't ruin my life. You stole from me, Cassidy. I was going to tell you. When? After the wedding. I was going to Kelm Keen. I was going to make it right. Telling someone after you've spent their money is not coming clean. It's confessing once you're safe. Mom. June 30th. I hung up. For 3 days she didn't call. On the 4th day, a Saturday morning in early June, I was on my front porch drinking coffee when a black SUV pulled into my driveway. A man got out who I'd never met but recognized immediately from the photos Doreen had shown me. Tall, gray-haired, expensive watch, the kind of bearing that comes from a lifetime of people moving out of his way. Brent's father, Conrad Halverson. He didn't bother with hello. Mrs. Pemberton, we need to talk. We can talk on the porch. I don't invite people into my home who don't introduce themselves. His mouth tightened. He sat on the wicker chair across from me. My son is in tears. My wife is in tears. Your daughter showed up at our house last night and told us a story that I am having trouble believing. Now I'd like to hear it from you. What did she tell you? That she lied to us about you. That you're not estranged. That you raised her alone. That she used your money and your name to plan the wedding without your consent. That you have legal control over the contracts. All of that is true. His face did something then. Not anger. Something more complicated. Why didn't you call me directly? Why threaten through her? Because I didn't owe you anything, Mr. Halverson. I owed my daughter the chance to do the right thing herself. He looked out at my crooked porch steps. At the hydrangeas I planted the year Daniel died. He was quiet for a long minute. What do you want? I want my daughter to stop being ashamed of me. And the money. She'll pay it back. I'm not pressing charges, but I am not paying for this wedding and I am not letting her pretend I don't exist. He nodded slowly. My father drove a delivery truck for Wonder Bread for 41 years. I looked at him. I don't usually tell people that. Why are you telling me? Because my son told me last night that he assumed your daughter's family was modest and he never asked questions because he didn't want to embarrass her. And I realized I raised a son who could think the word modest in that tone of voice. And I don't know how that happened. We sat there on my porch and didn't say anything for a while. Mrs. Pemberton, what are you going to do about the wedding? I'm going to let it happen, but I'm not going to fund it, and I'm not going to lie for it. The vendors are going to call you or your wife or my daughter looking for payment. That's not my problem. He stood up. He looked older than he had when he arrived. I appreciate your honesty. You're welcome to it. He left. I sat on the porch for another hour. I called every vendor that afternoon. I told each one the same thing. My signature on your contract is forged. I am the legal contact and I am formally revoking my financial guarantee effective immediately. Any future communication regarding payment should be directed to my daughter or to the Halverson family. I am not canceling the services. I am simply removing my name from the obligation. Most of them were quiet for a long moment. 2 of them thanked me for letting them know. One of them, the caterer, actually started laughing in disbelief and said she'd been doing this for 26 years and had never gotten that phone call before. By Tuesday, the wedding planner had called Cassidy in a panic. By Wednesday, Conrad Halverson had wired $42,000 to Stonebrook Estate himself. By Friday, half the vendors had pulled out because the new payment terms hadn't been settled in time. The florist couldn't get the imported peonies on short notice. The caterer's kitchen was already booked for another event because the deposit had been refunded. The string quartet found a new gig. Cassidy called me on Sunday night. She was not hysterical this time. She was quiet. Mom, yes, it's falling apart. I know. I don't know what to do. I think you do. Long pause. Will you come? To what? To what? To the wedding. To whatever it ends up being. Brent and I still want to get married. It's not going to be what I planned. Are you asking me as your mother or are you asking me because you need a witness? She started crying. I'm asking you as my mother. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I let her cry. I didn't fill the silence. Cassidy, I will come, but I want you to understand something. I will not stand at the back of a room and let you pretend I'm anything less than your mother. If I come as your mother. I sit where mothers sit. I get introduced as your mother. Or I don't come at all. Yes, what? Yes, Mom. You're my mother. I want everyone to know that. The wedding happened on October 11th anyway. It was at a small inn in Bucks County instead of Stonebrook. There were 60 guests instead of 300. There were sunflowers from a farm stand instead of imported peonies. The cake came from a bakery in Doylestown that Doreen knew. Lincoln flew in from Denver. He hadn't known about any of it until I called him 3 weeks before. He spent 45 minutes on the phone telling his sister exactly what he thought of her. And then he showed up and gave her away because Daniel couldn't. I wore a navy dress I bought at Macy's for $96 on clearance. I sat in the front row. Cassidy walked down the aisle and stopped in front of me before she got to Brent. She bent down and put her forehead against mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Brent's mother, the platinum-haired woman from the Instagram photos, came up to me at the reception. She held both my hands. She said, "Your daughter is the way she is because you made her that way." I'm sorry I assumed otherwise. I didn't know what to say back. I just nodded. Conrad Halverson sat next to me during dinner. He asked me about hospice. He asked real questions. He listened to the answers. At one point he said, "My mother died alone in a nursing home in Yonkers in 2003. I was in Tokyo on business. I never forgave myself. I told him that the people I sit with don't blame their families. They blame the world for making it so hard to be present." He cried a little into his napkin, and then he excused himself. Cassidy started paying me back 6 weeks later, $500 a month. She set up an automatic transfer. She sends me a text on the 1st of every month that just says, "Sent." It will take her almost 6 years to pay me back at that rate. I told her she could pay less. She said no. She comes to my house every other Sunday now. She sits at my kitchen table, the same table where I helped her with her algebra in 8th grade. She and Brent had a baby last spring, a little girl they named after my mother. Her name is Iris. When Cassidy handed her to me for the first time at the hospital, she said, "Mom, I want her to grow up knowing exactly who you are. No editing, no softening, you, just you." And then she said, I want her to know that what you did for me, I almost threw away. And I want her to know that you took me back anyway. Because that's the kind of woman you are. I didn't say anything. I just held my granddaughter and looked at my daughter and thought about all the years I'd spent thinking that nobody saw what it cost to raise 2 children alone. I thought nobody noticed the holidays I worked or the meals I skipped or the shoes I didn't replace. But Cassidy noticed. She'd just been ashamed of it instead of proud of it. And now she was finally proud. I still work at the podiatry clinic. I still sit with the dying 3 nights a week. I still live in the brown house on Hawthorne Street with a dripping kitchen sink. But I walk into rooms differently now. I don't shrink. I don't apologize for taking up space because my daughter learned the hard way that the woman who raised her is not someone to be hidden. She is someone to be claimed. And I learned just as hard that I never needed her permission to claim myself first. I think about that summer a lot. The summer I sat at my own kitchen table with bank statements spread out in front of me and tried to understand how my own daughter had walked into a place that called itself a bank and signed my name. I didn't raise her to do that. I know I didn't. And yet she did. So somewhere along the way, between the algebra homework and the soccer practices and the college tuition I worked overtime to help with, something I didn't see started to grow in her. A small embarrassment, a little wish that her life looked different. And because nobody, including me, ever named that small thing out loud, it grew until it could justify almost anything. That's the part I had to sit with. Not just what Cassidy did, but the soil it grew in. Children don't wake up one morning able to forge their mother's signature. They get there by 1,000 smaller permissions. The first time they roll their eyes at where you work and you don't say anything, the first time they introduce you with a half explanation and you laugh it off because you don't want to make a scene. Every time we shrink to make our children comfortable, we teach them that we are shrinkable. And one day they hand us the eraser and ask us to finish the job ourselves. I almost did. When she said, "Don't come to the wedding," I almost smiled and stayed small forever. The only reason I didn't is because somebody else's name on a contract forced me to look at what was happening. I am not proud that it took fraud to wake me up. I should have been awake the day she stopped inviting me to things. I should have been awake the day Mr. Halpern told me I had memory problems. I wasn't. I was tired. Tired is how good women lose themselves. What I learned sitting on my porch the morning Conrad Halverson drove away is that dignity is not something you wait to be given. It is something you decide to keep. Cassidy did not give me back my dignity at her wedding. I had already taken it back weeks earlier in a lawyer's office, in a phone call to a florist, in a quiet sentence to my own daughter that said, "You have until June 30th. By the time she walked down that aisle and put her forehead against mine, I had already decided who I was going to be for the rest of my life, with or without her approval. The hardest part of being a mother, I think, is understanding that loving your children does not mean disappearing for them. It means staying solid enough that they have something real to push against, something real to come home to when they finally figure out what matters. Cassidy came home. Not because I begged, because I stood. And little Iris is going to grow up knowing her grandmother as a whole person, not a footnote, because I refused, finally, to be a footnote in my own life. That is the only inheritance that ever really mattered.